What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our Big Ten football channel. It's time for our Week 6 power rankings as we head into Week 6 of the 2019 college football season. And it's starting to look pretty interesting in the Big Ten. It kind of was feeling like Ohio State was just going to run away with it, and they still have looked dominant. But Wisconsin, of course, has emerged after their big win over Michigan. Not this past weekend, but the week before. And now Penn State puts up a really impressive performance against Maryland. I think that things are starting to heat up here in the Big Ten, and I think that it's not just guaranteed to be Ohio State in this conference, but they have definitely so far looked like the best team. Number 14 is Rutgers. They fire their head coach after this loss to Michigan. They've hit rock bottom. Rutgers has just been awful now for several years. I don't know what they can do to get it turned around, but step one is trying to find a new head coach. We'll see how that works out for them. McLean Carter at quarterback, he's been injured. He showed some flashes when he came in there early in the season, a transfer from Texas Tech. But without him, the offense, maybe it doesn't look that great. And Rutgers, again, still clearly the bottom team in the Big Ten. Number 13 is Illinois. Illinois is 2-2 on the season, 0-1 in conference play after that loss to Nebraska. I tell you what, they showed some fight in that game. They had a legitimate chance to win. They actually had a lead in that game, but they lost it, and that would have been a huge momentum booster for them because they really struggled this season. They lost to Eastern Michigan. So we'll see what happens with Illinois. It's the team that I had fairly high hopes for coming into this season, and they really haven't lived up to that. But there is a long season left, and when I say high hopes, I didn't expect them to go 9-3 or anything like that, but I thought they would at least be right there on the edge of bowl contention. Number 12 is Indiana. They are now 3-2 on the season, but they put up a pretty good performance against Michigan State. They also had a lead in this game in the fourth quarter, but they did lose it, and it really was more like a one-possession game. Michigan State scored a defensive touchdown there at the very end to make the score look a little bit worse, but this was a close game. Either team could have won it. Indiana is looking pretty good right now, pretty competitive. But if that's any indication of Michigan State versus Ohio State, you look at how each team played against Indiana. Ohio State destroyed them. Michigan State struggled. So keep that in mind. But let's move on now to number 11. That is Nebraska. 3-2 on the season, 1-1 in conference play after they got destroyed by Ohio State. I mean, this game was not close at all. Nebraska just has not lived up to the expectations this season. I think a lot of people, including myself, looked at the way they finished last year. They looked at Adrian Martinez back at quarterback, Scott Frost and what he did at UCF, but it's not the same thing here at Nebraska. This is not the American Conference, much tougher in the Big Ten, and this team has struggled so far this season, but still a long ways to go, and they've got time to maybe get it turned around. Number 10 is Northwestern. They are 1-3 on the season, 0-2 in the conference. Showed some fight against Wisconsin this past weekend. They really, I don't want to go back to it, but I still don't understand the 2-point conversion call. If anyone could explain that to me, if you watch this game, why did they go for 2 when I think it was the first touchdown? Again, I don't know what was going on there. But anyways, don't want to harp on that. This team, I still feel like it's going to come around. They've played a tough schedule early. The offense has been terrible, but it started to show some flashes in that second half against Wisconsin, and I think Northwestern's a team that will get better and better as the season goes. Number 9 is Purdue. You can make an argument, I think, for them to be 10 or 11 even potentially, but they had a nice comeback against Minnesota. They almost came back and won that game. But the problem for them is Elijah Sindelar is now injured, possibly for the season. So we're going to have to just wait and see about Purdue. I want to see them in another game before I'd really drop them. I still think this offense has a chance to be really explosive. I really like Jeff Brom, their head coach. So we're going to keep them at number 9 because they almost came back to beat Minnesota, who is undefeated. So, yeah, we'll see how Purdue winds up. Really, 8 through 11, all 4 of these teams it's impossible to rank them, really. I've got Maryland at number 8. Still have to go back to what they did against Syracuse. I know this team has potential because of what we saw in that game, but they have not lived up to it the last couple of games. They were horrible against Penn State. Had some bad turnovers early in the game, and it just kind of snowballed on them. This was a really impressive performance by Penn State, by the way. But Maryland, to me, is kind of the start of that next tier of teams that are really struggling and teams that we just can't figure out right now. But the top 7 teams, they've been able to play pretty good football this year, starting with Minnesota. Yes, they've had some close calls, but this team is 4-0, 1-0 in the Big Ten. They beat Purdue this past weekend, so all you got to do is win. I mean, as long as they keep winning, they're going to be in good shape. Tanner Morgan had a career day against Purdue. He only had 1 incompletion and threw almost for 400 yards, had 4 touchdowns. Rodney Smith is back. He had a big day, 115 yards on the ground. This offense really got it going for Minnesota. Defense did give up some points, especially late in this game, but I think this team is still right there among that group of teams that's chasing Wisconsin in the West. I still think Wisconsin is clearly the best team in that division right now, but Minnesota's in that conversation. Then maybe they could challenge them. Number 6 is Michigan. The Wolverines got the offense back on track. Anytime you're struggling, the perfect remedy is just a game against Rutgers, and that's exactly what Michigan got. Shea Patterson looked pretty good in this one. Looked good running the football as well. Have they got it figured out? That's the question. I think a lot of people have already given up on this Michigan team. They've kind of just decided that this team is going to be awful this year because of how they've started, but they just have 1 loss, and it wasn't even in the division, and they still get some big games at home, including Ohio State at the end of the year. So don't give up yet if you're a Michigan fan, but they've got a big one coming up against Iowa this weekend that they have to win. Michigan State is at number 5. The Spartans survive against Indiana. What is it about that matchup? Seems like Indiana is always giving Michigan State trouble. They beat them back a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. But Michigan, again, number 5 because of that defense that they've got. Offense continues to struggle a little bit. They played better in this game, though. Brian Lewerke had 300 yards passing. So it wasn't a bad day for them offensively. And if they can play that way offensively against some of the better teams, then Michigan State becomes a real threat here in the Big Ten. They're number 5. Number 4 is Iowa. Iowa has had no problems with their offense. They've had a big year so far scoring the football, and this weekend was no different as they beat Middle Tennessee 48-3. Nate Stanley was solid once again. Torrin Young ran for 131 yards. That's something that they've been lacking a little bit, is the run game. And if they can start to get that to go with Nate Stanley in this passing attack, Iowa's offense becomes very dangerous even against the better defenses in the Big Ten. So that is going to be something to watch. If they can run the football against Michigan, they will beat Michigan. I can pretty much guarantee that. So they're number 4. Number 3 is Penn State. Again, one of the more impressive performances this past weekend as they take down Maryland 59-0. There were some questions about the inexperience of this team. Sean Clifford, at quarterback, he had no problems in this game. 398 yards passing. They haven't had as much success running the football as I thought they would. I thought that would really be the strength of this offense, but it's been Clifford, and he ran for 54 yards in this game as well. So this is a very dangerous Penn State team. You can see the talent, the speed when you just watch them play. They've recruited phenomenally, and Penn State is still in that elite category of talent in the Big Ten. Number 2 is Wisconsin. They are 4-0, 2-0 in the conference with a win over Northwestern this past weekend. Do I think that Wisconsin is overrated because they struggled in this game? No, absolutely not. I said in my predictions last week that it would be a pretty close game. It was exactly what I thought it would be. I thought Wisconsin's offense would do a little bit better. Their defense really bailed them out. I think they had 2 defensive touchdowns in this game. That may not be right, but I know they had 1. And I watched most of the game, but I just can't remember. It's been a few days ago. Anyways, Jonathan Taylor, 119 yards on the ground. Jack Cohn didn't do a whole lot throwing the football. They need to maybe let him throw it some more, I think, and get a little bit more balanced. Sometimes they're still a little bit too conservative. But they got the win, and they are our number 2 team here in our Week 6 Big Ten Power Rankings. Number 1 is Ohio State. I don't think anyone can really dispute that. This has been the best team in the Big Ten by far so far this season. Consistently. Now, the thing with Ohio State is they haven't really played anyone great so far. They played some decent teams, Cincinnati, Indiana, Nebraska. They've played some decent teams, but they haven't played anyone great. And this weekend, they play Michigan State. That'll be a pretty good test for them. By far, the biggest test they've had so far. So we'll find out how good Justin Fields and this offense is against that Michigan State defense. And also, how good is this Ohio State defense? They've been really, really good so far this season. Now, Michigan State might not be the biggest test for their defense, and we might have to wait a little bit longer before we find find out really how good this defense is. But I had them at number 1 in my top 25 poll this week. I feel like this team has shown that they are the best team in the country right now. Doesn't necessarily mean that I think they're going to win the national championship or be the best team at the end of the season. But again, so far, they've dominated against every opponent. And if they can do that against some of the top tier teams in the Big Ten, watch out for